Are you one of the lucky people who has like a huge raspberry bush in their neighborhood or a peach tree on their property and you have all this fruit in the summer and you don't know what to do with it? I am not one of those people, but I still love making jam, and I do it every summer because I'm a bit of a summer addict. So today I'm going to show you how to make jam. It works with many, many kinds of fruit. I'm using raspberry. What I've added to my pot is 3 pounds or 12 cups of raspberries, 3 pounds of fruit, and I have 1.5 pounds or 4.5 cups of sugar. And I'm combining those two things in a pot together. Jam is actually really, really simple. A lot of people are kind of afraid to make jam, but you should not be, because it's actually one of the simplest things to do. And I don't even use any additional pectin, so my jam only has 4 ingredients: fruit, sugar, salt, and lemon juice. I'm gonna add about a pinch of salt, big pinch, coarse salt, and then the juice of half of a lemon. If you were using any other kind of berry, you would do the same exact thing. Just squeeze the lemon juice in, and that's all your ingredients. Mash it a bit with a potato masher, just to start to get the juices going. And then what you need to do is just bring this to a boil. This is starting to come to a boil, and as you can see, it's getting kind of aggressive. Make sure that when you're making jam, you use a pot that's big enough, because it will boil up quite aggressively in the beginning. What you want to do for the beginning part of cooking your jam is to cook it until it's boiling in a boil that will not be stirred down. As you can see, when I just stirred it, it stopped boiling. It's not boiling enough yet. You also want to make sure not only that your pot is big enough, but also that it is a nice heavy bottomed pot. You don't want your jam to scorch on the bottom. All of that sugar and that fruit could cause problems. See how it's boiling and I'm stirring it and it's not subsiding? That's the kind of boiling that I'm talking about. Once it gets to this point, it should take another 10 or 12 minutes. And you really want to stand here stirring it. And what's going to happen is slowly these aggressive bubbles will subside a little bit. You'll start to see the fruit on the top, and it'll be really nice and thick. There's this foam on the top. You're going to want to remove that before you put it into the jars or whatever you're going to store it in. I generally don't skim too much in the beginning because some of what looks like foam is really just bubbles. When you cook jam in such small batches, it doesn't take that long. So it goes from being just a bunch of hot fruit to being jam in a matter of minutes. Now I am going to start skimming a little bit of the foam off. I just like to use a metal spoon with a really thin edge to skim off the foam. It's already starting to get much, much thicker. The bubbles are kind of more slow, a little molten lava-like. You can test this with a Carey thermometer. It should be 220 degrees. I like to just use the spoon method. If there are 2 drops coming off of your spoon, they'll come together and they'll form a sheet dropping off. Or you can test it on a cold plate. You put the plates in the freezer, you put a little jam on there. When you push your finger through it, it'll make a little path. So now you're starting to see a lot of the seeds on the top. The mixture is moving much more slowly when you move your spoon through. It's very close to being jam. Now this is totally different than making jelly. It's not the same process really. And many fruits don't actually have enough pectin to make jelly on their own, but they will make jam because there's all of these solids in there that help thicken it. It's done, you guys. I'm gonna turn this off because it's flattering me so much, but look. So I'm holding up the spoon and it's dropping off, and then all of a sudden at the end, it drops off and it makes a sheet. It's gelled, it's done. Sometimes it doesn't sheet the way that it's supposed to. If you look it up, I use the ball preserving books all the time and their website, freshpreserving.com. It's the best resource for all of your canning needs. Also, anyway, they have really cool diagrams of what it looks like when it's sheeting. That's all. Ready? All right, so here's the plate with the jam on it. It was in the freezer for just a minute. As you can see, I'm putting my finger through it. It's not only wrinkling, but it's leaving a little path. That's another way to that you know your jam is done. Uh-oh, jam on my fingers. Now it's time to jar them up. I'm gonna put them in ball jars. If you're not going to be canning them, if you're gonna put them in the freezer, any freezer-safe container will do. I want to strain some of the seeds out of the jam because red raspberries have a lot of seeds. It isn't necessary. It's just something that I like to do. So I usually take a little less than half or half of the jam and then just pass it through a fine sieve to remove them. I turned this off and yet it is still boiling. That's how hot it is. So be careful. Removing some of the seeds does reduce the yield on your jam a little bit, but it gives a nice consistency. Scrape off the bottom to get all the jam back in. Combine this back with the rest of your jam, and now you can put it into your jars or whatever you're going to store it in. If you're planning on freezing it, like I said, make sure that they're freezer safe jars. If you're putting it in plastic, I recommend letting it cool a little bit before you put it in. But I'm gonna put mine in jars, which I have washed and I've sterilized. By boiling them for 10 minutes, you lift one jar out at a time. If you're going to seal them by sterilizing them in the boiling water bath and storing them on your shelf, you need to make sure that they're sterilized. You need to make sure they're hot. You add your hot jam to your hot jar. You fill them, leaving a half-inch headspace. And then once you've filled your jar, you want to clean the top to make sure that there's no jam on it whatsoever. So use a damp, hot towel, and then bring your lids. These kinds of canning jars have a double lid system. The top and then the screw that holds it in place. You want to remove your top from hot water. They've also been sterilized. Place it on top of your jar and then use your screw to hold it in place. It shouldn't be too tight. It's just there to hold this in place until the jar seals, which you ensure that it will seal by returning it to your boiling water. It needs to be covered by a full inch, and you need to boil it for 10 minutes. That's if you want these to be shelf stable. If you're not gonna be processing it to be shelf stable, you want to make sure that the jam cools a little bit before you cover it up. Otherwise it might seal on its own and then you don't really know what's going on. So this is what I do for that. I'm not gonna lie, I actually like it better in the freezer. I find that it stays fresher longer, even though it's shelf stable for up to a year when you process it in a boiling water bath. I find that it discolors a little bit and the flavor's not as fresh. So if you have room in your freezer, that's what I like to do with my jam. So I take it, I fill my jars, leave a half an inch of headspace, and then I cool it uncovered, and then I cover it up same way, put the lids on, screw them on, and then label them and put them in the fridge. Once they've cooled down enough to put in your freezer or refrigerator, or you've processed them, make sure that you save yourself at least one jar to start eating immediately, because you are going to want to. And hopefully you can make enough to last you all year long. Hi guys, thanks for watching this video. Be sure to click here if you want to subscribe, and click over here if you want to continue watching more great videos like this.